Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It goes without saying, if you want to understand this policy, you have got to get, read, master, thoroughly go through the Cataclysm book, Surviving the Cataclysm, Your Guide to the Worst Financial Crisis in World History, the second edition, published a couple of years ago. It includes a detailed program on how to do this. Right now we're going to highlight the immediate agitational leading edge of how to do this. The zombie banks cannot finance world recovery. They are clogged with a mass of kited, bankrupt derivatives, collateralized debt obligations most of all, but also structured investment vehicles and other kinds. All credit that is pumped into them, it goes into the black hole of these derivatives. It's like trying to give somebody a transfusion when a vampire is sucking their blood. You don't put the transfusion in through the vampire. You remove the vampire and apply the transfusion directly to the victim. So the Republican nostrums about cutting government jobs, and then that will create jobs, this is obviously insane. What we need is a policy which draws broadly on the experience of the New Deal and especially of Lend-Lease, the 1940 to 1946 program launched by Roosevelt for defense preparedness. As we look around, we've also got to bear in mind the theoretical contributions of the anti-Hitler Germans in the years before 1933. W.S. Wojtyński of the German Trade Union Confederation, he was their top economist. This would be a leftist. And Wilhelm Lautenbach, Lautenbach, a conservative official of the Ministry of Finance. But they basically agree on this. You force the central bank to create credit for job creation, right? Kreditschöpfung für Arbeitsbeschaffung. Create credit to create jobs under government auspices. Yes, indeed. But most of the jobs end up being in the private sector through the contractors and subcontractors of how this gets done. So it's a model of dirigism. The government sets the stage, puts it in motion, and it's the private contractors who carry it out and reap, of course, tremendous benefits. But it's the common wealth, it's the general welfare that reaps the big benefits. So here's the outline of a law. The Congress directs, orders, the Federal Reserve under Bernanke. By the way, the Fed is a creature of Congress. Congress made them. Congress can unmake them. But let's, before we worry about that, let's just direct them to do one positive step for what we want. The Federal Reserve System is directed to issue $1 trillion, $1,000 billion, as an initial tranche of credit. This is federal credit. The interest rate approaches 0%. Nothing new about that. That's what Bernanke has been doing for the past 2.5 years. But, of course, Bernanke only does it if you're a bank, a credit card company, a money market company, or some other kind of financial parasite. We're saying, whatever else you do, this tranche of the $1 trillion does not go to those purposes. It is 0% federal credit, and it is available for maturities up to 50 years. And the form that this is actually going to take is a rediscount guarantee. The rediscount guarantee means that if the state of California or of Illinois, of Texas or of New York or any other state that has the brains to engage in this, and I think a lot of them will discover the brains, if they have shovel-ready infrastructure projects, then those states can issue bonds, and those bonds will be bought by the Federal Reserve, sometimes through the intermediaries of regional banks, but not necessarily. It can go right to the Federal Reserve. So the Bernanke has got to say, I stand ready to buy the bonds of state infrastructure projects and of multi-state consortia, like the New York, New Jersey Port Authority for the Port of New York. They can issue bonds too. The bonds will be automatically bought by the Federal Reserve, and the terms of the bonds can be close to 0% interest and the maturity is 50 years. So you don't have to worry about selling the bonds to some zombie banker who's worried about his derivatives, nor do you have to worry about some hedge fund hyena coming into the picture. It goes right to the Federal Reserve. This is essentially the lesson. You take the New Deal, you stir in Lend-Lease, you stir in some Boytinsky and some Lautenbach, and you have it. This is what we learned with great suffering in the Depression of the 1930s. We must apply this now. Now, what kinds of projects? Suppose you want to say, well, I'm going to start a new financial services operation, or I want them for drug money laundering. The answer has to be no, no, no. Only approved categories of lending. And what are those? Let's look at fast rail. Now, this can be as fast as you want. The faster, the better. Some of this will be the fast rail that you see in Europe, but better if you go to Maglev, you need a transcontinental fast rail. You've got to go from Boston to New York to Chicago and all the way across to San Francisco, Los Angeles. So you need your transcontinental fast rail. You've got to have your East Coast fast rail from Maine to Florida, and that includes, of course, the critical Northeast corridor here from Boston to Norfolk, Virginia. You've got to have heavy-duty fast rail, and again, the faster the better. You can do dual systems where some of it's steel wheel on steel rail, some of it is magnetic cushion. Do it any way you can. Obviously, try to make it a unified national system. Remember, this is going to be in place for a couple of 100 years, so you really want to take the most modern things you can find. Out on the West Coast, we got to do Vancouver to Tijuana, Mexico. So that obviously includes Seattle, Portland. It includes San Francisco, Sacramento. It goes to Los Angeles. It goes to San Diego. You can have branches going out into the Central Valley. You can do all sorts of subsets of this. Tunerville trolleys, Maglev Tunerville trolleys that go off of it. You've got to have a Great Lakes system. You've got to have Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, places like this have got to be included. You've obviously got to have one that goes from Chicago to New Orleans. You've got to have it. There's just no way. Look at all that grain. If you need to get that out fast, then there's got to be a railroad there to do it. And then we have the other regional ramifications. The Texas T-bone has got to be included, and so on. You get the idea. This is the point one, is to build fast rail and get that all going simultaneously. Secondly, you have got to rebuild the interstate highway system. There's a lot of discussion on the radio these days about how the U.S. Interstate highway system is approaching the point of simple breakdown. Big discussion this week in the Wall Street Journal about the Tappan Zee Bridge. This is above New York City. I guess it goes from Westchester County to New York State on the other side. This is where the Hudson is quite wide. It's the Tappan Zee, and we're told that this bridge is perhaps in danger of falling down. Well, then rebuild it using 0%, 50-year federal credit. New York State issues the bonds. The Fed buys the bonds automatically. The terms of the bonds are 0% coupon, a small payment of principal per year. You divide the sum 50 by 50 to make a yearly payment. You can stagger the payments so that they're backloaded if you want. That's probably a good idea, and so forth. Then we have our water systems. Hey, we've got the entire Mississippi-Missouri system. We got the Ohio River. We got the Tennessee River. We got the Arkansas River. We have all these places. They are also about to fall down. And we have these cases that I've talked to you about. Barges with coal can't get out of Pennsylvania. They can't go to the places where they're needed. Some places are now threatened with a lack of electricity. Rebuild the water systems, the locks, the canals. This then includes sewage. It includes flood control. It includes rebuilding dams. Don't let environmentalist lunatics get in the way and stop this. Brush them aside. Use emergency powers as needed. Electricity grids. Well, you've got 103 nuclear reactors. What are you going to do about it? Japan shows us, I think, one thing. Don't use 40-year-old nuclear plants with a flawed design. Rebuild them. That means high-temperature reactors, pebble bed, fourth generation, the most modern safety controls, no cost cutting, and don't let some fat-headed executive tell you otherwise. And then you've got public buildings, and we'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio.